Hey, welcome back to the studio. Today I have another Lightroom and Photoshop walkthrough for you. We are going to turn this photo of the Seattle Space Needle into this cool Milky Way shot. So sit tight, here we go. Okay, so let's get started. As I always do, I'm here in Lightroom in the Develop module, and I begin in the basic panel, the very first panel. Pro tip, right-click, solo mode, so you only see one panel at a time. I like to just keep focused on one thing at a time. All right, so I'm going to work my way up through this tone panel, and then we'll take it from there. So starting with blacks, hold the Alt or Option key so you can see how much clipping you're getting. And in this particular image, a lot of what's down under the awning entrance here to the Space Needle sort of visitor area is just of no interest whatsoever. Completely fine with me if that is jet black. So I will go somewhere right about there, I think makes sense. Similarly with whites, we're just going to kind of move this up or down until we have some highlights blowing out. We already have highlights blowing out here in the fountain and in the sort of specular reflection areas of the Space Needle. It's blown out. So I think we're going to leave whites alone. Highlights would normally be next. Let's take the highlights down a little bit. That helps to reveal some of the detail here in the fountain, but not too much. And then let's move the exposure up quite a bit. I'm holding Alt now, or Option. So that looks pretty good. Finally, I'm going to actually rotate this because it sort of doesn't look straight. Unfortunately, I'm not standing right in the middle of the Space Needle. You can see that the legs aren't quite even, and if I had my head mounted correctly on my shoulders, I would have been standing about 5 feet to the right, but it is what it is. As long as it looks straight, I will be happy. I think that is a pretty good start. All right, let's just get rid of this thing right here. And I'm just going to use the spot removal tool. That's Q on the keyboard. Done. Okay, I think this is now ready for Photoshop. Okay, here we are in Photoshop. I've loaded 2 layers. The base layer, the bottom layer, is the original, completely unadjusted RAW, straight out of the camera. And the next is the adjusted RAW that we just developed in Lightroom. I'll work off this one, and then this way we'll be able to kind of see how far we've come. All right. First step, this cherry picker thing has got to go. For this, I like to just use the lasso tool. And for ease, I'm just going to use polygonal lasso, and we'll just draw a selection right around this guy. Cool, and then we just do edit, fill, content aware. A few seconds later, magic happens. Looks like Photoshop has decided to copy this security camera, so let's do away with that completely. I'll just use the clone stamp. Cool. All right, next. I think the next thing that we're going to do is make this sky really interesting. And my plan for this is to actually put in some stars in the sky. I know this is artistic license, but that's what I love to do. So again, I'm going to use the Greg Benz Lumenzia plugin. Totally not sponsored. I just really love this thing. Choose the blue channel and one of these levels, and let's see how we do. That is not enough. That is not enough. That is great. Let's look at levels and give it some tweaks. I think we can open that sky way up. That's pretty good. Yeah. That's really good. Cool. Let's grab a selection. I probably should have brought the file in first. That's okay. Let's save this as a channel just so I know that I'll have it. I have the file here. I got this cool Milky Way picture from Unsplash. I'll just make it big enough to cover the whole image. Great. Load that channel as a selection again. Apply a mask. There you have it. Now we can move this thing around a little bit. I actually kind of like where it is. Yeah, how about right there? Let's see how we're doing on the trees. That looks remarkably good. Luminosity masking for the win. That looks fantastic. I think it could use a little bit of darkness or depth. Let's try reducing the opacity a whole bunch. We don't want it to be overpowering. Really, the focus here is the Space Needle. Okay, the next thing that comes to my mind is all of this stuff under the awning is very distracting to me, and I sort of want to see this just get darkened out. So I think what I'm going to do is create a curves layer for that. I'm going to like just really darken it a whole bunch. Great. And then let's make this mask completely black, and we'll paint it in right where we want to see it. Cool, that looks really nice. Well, let's play with the curve a little bit more. That's pretty cool. You can see how that just really removes that distraction. You know, you're not bothered by the fact that the luminosity here is pretty wrong. You're not really bothered by that because you're not looking at it. It's not important. Great. It's just a little bit too warm. And so I think I'm going to try to cool it off a little bit also. We can do that with a hue saturation layer. I'll just like reduce the saturation a little bit and maybe just shift it a little bit toward a blue. Let's see how that works. No, I don't think that's going to work. I think we can just reduce the saturation a little bit. It might be good enough. Yeah. Great. Always remember to rename your layers, which I don't always remember to do. I think the sky is a little bit too bright. So I'm going to take this same mask and I'm going to add another curves, and we're just going to darken up the sky just a little bit. Yeah, I like that. Great. Next, let's take a look at the Space Needle itself. I think the Space Needle itself could use a little bit of contrast. And so one of the tricks that you can do is control click on this. This is the mask that that allows the sky and blocks the Space Needle. And let's just invert this mask. So Shift Control I inverts a mask. And then we can add yet another curves layer. Now you see this mask, if you hold Option or Alt and click on the mask, you can see it as a mask. You see this one lets through the building and blocks out most of the sky. I'd actually like the sky to be darker, so let's hit Command M to open curves and darken this mask even more. That looks great. Cool, so on this curves layer now we can actually apply a little bit of an S-curve to the building itself. It's looking pretty good. But I don't want it to affect anything else, so I'm going to group this layer, Control G, and I'm going to add a mask to the group, and then I'm going to I'm going to paint out the parts that I don't want with a big black brush. Great. This starts to get into some sophisticated mind-bending mask stuff, because what you have here is a curves that basically affects only the parts that are white, but it also only affects the parts that are white here. So you have to sort of imagine, like, what if you overlaid them both and only the parts that are white on both would be affected? That looks really cool. Look at how much more contrast comes out. Lovely. So finally, I probably should have been standing in front of this fountain rather than behind it, but since the fountain is here, I want this fountain to look a little bit more interesting, and so I want to put some tonal contrast on this fountain. I'm going to call this Space Needle. I'll call this Contrast. I'm going to make a merged layer of everything. That's Control Shift Alt or Option E. It's one of the more difficult keyboard shortcuts to press. And then I'm going to use, for this one, I'm going to use Nik Collection's Color Effects Pro 4. Again, totally not sponsored. Nik software was acquired by Google. They're a stand-up company. They make good stuff. This Nik collection is, I think, $70, something like that. I think it's really worth it. I tend to only use a couple of the filters in here, but tonal contrast is almost worth the whole $70 by itself. You can see how this is really bringing out some of the interesting texture in this water. Great. So again, this looks great, but I really only want to see it here on the fountain. So I'm going to create a mask. Pro tip, hold Alt or Option, click on the mask, and you get a reverse mask, which blocks everything. And then you can paint on with white to make it show through. I'm going to use a slightly lower flow. It just helps me to not overdo it. And I'm just going to paint here over this fountain. Really cool. Another pro tip, when you're editing a mask, press backslash to see the mask view, to see it as a quick mask. And you can also paint in this view. I'm pretty satisfied with that. See how that looks? Really nice. Let me zoom in so you can really see what that's looking like. Really brings the character out. Cool. So this is nice. One more thing that I want to fix is these trees look too bright. There's actually a lamp or something on the other side there that's lighting up these tree branches, and I sort of just want the trees to be darker so that it's not distracting to the eye. So let's just trash this blend layer, which we don't need anymore. And why don't we start with the mask of the sky, and we'll just invert it. So this is what the mask looks like. Invert the mask, Control-Shift-I, and then let's create a curves layer using that mask. So now that mask is the exact opposite. This looks pretty good. I think I want to add some curves to the mask, so Control-Command-M to open curves, and we'll just adjust this until I get a little bit more contrast and separation here in the trees. I think that looks pretty good. So then we can adjust the curve on the adjustment layer itself. Let's just try to get those trees to look quite a bit darker. That's awesome. And now we can brush on the mask. So fill the mask with black and then brush on white where you want the darkness to show through. Before, after. We are getting a little bit of darkening in the sky, but I think that's fine. It's like a little bit of a vignette. It leads the eye in toward the Space Needle, which is what we care about. Great. So, once again, from before to after. I hope this was helpful, and if there's anything else that that you want to know, if you want me to get more into detail on any of these techniques that I've used, or if you want to see anything else, just let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to try to help you out if I can. Take care for now, and I'll see you on the next video.